Okay, another question is, how did you learn to be so humble?
Oh, I don't know if I'm humble. I think I have. I think that's a complimentary question, but I don't think I'm always humble. I think humility should disappear the moment you think you have it. Right? So, yeah, I think if you can keep that principle, the moment you think you have humility, you should. I think in Philippians, the Bible says, consider others better than yourself. That's the best scripture I want to give you. If you keep on, increasing this notion that the other person is better than you, not in a manner where you're beating yourself. No, not that. That is not what I mean. What Paul means is like Christ's example. Even though he was God, he became a servant. And he became obedient to the point of death on the cross. In the most shameful way, he died. And Paul says, therefore, consider others better than yourself. So I think that is a secret of humility. And Floyd McClung says, humility is being willing to be known for who you really are. You understand? He always says this. Humility is being willing to be known for who you really are. If you're weak, say you're weak. Don't pretend as if you're strong. If you don't know the scripture verse, you don't have to feel bad. Just say it. You don't know. But be secure in who you are. Because Christ loves you anyway. Right? So be willing to be known for who you really are. And I wouldn't say I'm humble. I'm still practicing. There are times, many times in my life, where I have to deal with pride. Yeah, but I think we can't ignore. We have to fight pride, and we have to be humble. That's a calling to live a life of humility, right? So our prayer should always be, Lord, not make me humble, help me to be humble. God can never make us humble. We have to choose humility over pride.
Another question is, if someone senses they have a calling towards full-time ministry, but yet the parents or the family have an expectation of this person to go into more secular studies and secular career, that sort of thing, what does someone do when they have that conflict?
I think it's always good to get the blessings of the parents. As a general principle, it's always good to get the blessings of your parents, because they are divinely appointed over you. And also always understand at the back of your mind that God's timing and your timing don't always match. When God calls you into what we call as full-time ministry, it may not be in the next 3 months. It could well be after 2 years, right? It could well be after you have finished your education. So you don't have to fight and be in a hurry for everything. You understand? And again, one step forward, 2 steps backward sort of a phase will be there in your life, where you really walk in humility, in the sense that you allow Christ to speak to your family members, right? Now, different people have different stories. My wife's story is very different, and I think it's a classic example of how not to be arrogant and yet do what God tells you to do. Because Vicky had finished her undergraduate program in Shillong. This time when we went to Nagaland, she showed me the place where God spoke to her. She was walking, she was a teacher in a school, and she was walking to her school, and she stopped in this particular spot because God was speaking to her in her heart. And she felt like that there's something more to life than what she's doing. And she took an about turn and went to her youth pastor, right? And she told the youth pastor, "This is how I feel, would you please pray for me? I'm not satisfied with what I'm doing." Now she was already about late 20s, 27 or 28 at that time. And the youth pastor prayed for her and said, "Have you heard about DTS?" and began to speak about YWAM and gave her a form. And she took the form and she pretty much decided in a few days to come to YWAM. And when she told her brother, the brother was not very happy, but he agreed that she would go to do a DTS. So she came to do a DTS, and while she was doing a DTS, she became 100% sure that God called her to full-time ministry. So when she went back to her brother after the DTS and told her brother, God called me to full-time ministry, the brother basically said, very lovingly, he said, well, I have supported you financially all my life, ever since you lost your dad, ever since we lost our father. I have 5 children. If you're making a decision, this is a life decision you're making, you're deciding that you are now moving away from what I think will be great for you. What I think will be great for you is to get a job. I'm trying to get you a government job. And he already got a government job actually by that time. And here is a job for you. You can stay in Nagaland. You can get a salary the rest of your life, right? Or you can join this organization, and you're saying this organization doesn't pay money. So you have to make sure you understand the implications of your decision. You're old enough to understand this. And he pretty much told her that if you step out of my house, you cannot depend on me for finances, because I'm here getting you a job to help you put you on your own feet. So she had to count the cost. It was not an easy decision, but she prayed over it. And she took her brother's blessings. Her brother blessed her reluctantly, but he blessed her. And she came into YWAM Pune. Yeah? And today the family recognizes Vicky's validity. The whole family recognizes that she's not doing something, she's not a missionary living in a hut with no voice in the family. No. She has an equal and more powerful voice in the entire Zimomi family that she belongs to. You understand? That's why they said, please come for the wedding. We cannot have this wedding without you guys be around. Right? So I think the principle is to walk in humility, walk in God's timing. Generally the principle is honor your family setup, your parents, your elders, get their blessings, even though they give you reluctant blessings, get their blessings. But then, if they give you a reluctant way of praying for you, that means you have to prove yourself. And the more you begin to show God's faithfulness in your life to your family, the more they become secured. Wow, he or she is doing the right thing. Because my family members come and they begin to see what we're doing with our finances. Right? It's not like we are struggling. You understand? It's not like we are, really wearing a torn shirt or a torn pant. Now, that may be true of some people, genuinely. But when you follow God, God provides you. That's a principle of God's calling, right? He provides where He leads. And when your family sees that, they may have started on a shaky foundation of just praying for you because you're asking you to pray for them. But after 2 years, when they see you really doing amazing things in ministry, they will joyfully start introducing you to people. Yeah? But don't ever make the mistake of going against them just because you think you have a word of the Lord. Right? If the Lord gives you a word, tell God, would you also speak to my parents? Right? He can easily do that. Very rarely does a situation come in your life where you really need to say, parents, I love you, but I really have to leave this and follow God. You understand? Most parents will like it when you respect them, and they will joyfully sooner or later release you if you're consistently telling the same thing over a period of time. Do you see what I'm saying? And when they release you, you'll be surprised. They'll become your supporters. Because you've given them room to release you joyfully. Right? So that's the story of our lives. My own parents, my own siblings, my own wife's families. For the first 2 years, they didn't know what Aldrin and Vicky were doing. They were shy to tell people what we were doing. But today, they're very proud of us. Because over the years, they began to see how God is so faithful to us. My brother-in-law who passed away caught my hand in Bellore Hospital just before he died. Just about 3 weeks before he died. He said, Aldrin, I need to tell you this. You live like an MLA. Because all of his colleagues, friends, all in politics, he said, I've never seen people following Christ can be so royal in their life and yet be poor in their finances. We do all these things. We live in a fancy house, but we don't have a lot of money. You see what I'm saying? And people ask us this question, how do you do this? Well, follow Christ. That's a secret. And so our security is our God, right? So give enough time to those relationships that God has ordained over your life. Never easily go away from them. Only when it becomes a very, very tough situation, you have to step out of that, right? But in most cases, you can easily handle by saying, God, give me the right time, give me the grace, give me the understanding, help me to fulfill that calling within my domestic circle right now because my parents haven't released me. Let me be faithful son or daughter and show me the right time to make my stand between you and my parents. Do it gracefully. Yeah. Sometimes even after your marriage, you're still under their leadership, right? So it's a cultural thing again. So I basically have seen an average here that in the South Asian culture, you're really under your parents until you're married, generally speaking, right? So if you're being called to serve God at age 22 and you're not married, you're still considered a child who's under their influence. Then you add to that you don't have any money. Then they will even more think you're dependent, right? Because you're dependent on them for everything. You're asking them every time you're calling them and saying, send me money. I need money, right? So, but if you are working in a job, you would be sending money home. Then they will say you're responsible. So what our parents are really looking for is my son, is my daughter responsible enough in life? Is he making this decision? Is she making this decision in a very responsible manner or not? And when you're so young and you're making a decision like this with no finances whatsoever, they're concerned for you that you're being very responsible in the way you're making your decision. So they're trying to help you and protect you from that bad decision. That was the case even for us in our own lives, right? But over a period of time, they began to see that we were actually very responsible, that we were very wise with our finances. We had not only friends our age, but we have friends of all ages. True, I'm 45 right now, but I have friends. Tomorrow I have an appointment with somebody who considers me his friend. He's 65. He calls me his youngest friend. You understand? And I'm not talking to him as uncle, I talk to him as a person. You need to learn to be responsible in your relationships. You need to learn to show your responsibility in your work, show your responsibility with your finances, show your responsibility not only in ministry, but become an overall responsible person. Then your family will say, I think I know what James is doing. He's a responsible person. Once they know that you're responsible, they won't worry about you as much, right? That's what my brother-in-law and his wife were looking at us. When they first came to YWAM Pune to see us, 2 years after we got married, they were expecting to live in a very small house. I mean, he's the additional chief engineer of the entire state of Nagaland. So pretty big guy. He never cared for missions or missionaries. So his whole notion of missions was that we would be really struggling. But when he came to Pune, he was surprised. We had a very nice house in a very nice society, a gated community. I had a car. My colleague had gone to furlough for 4 months, so using a nice car. We had nice furniture at home, right? And then I took them to a YWAM. They were surprised to meet so many people from the international community. They were surprised to find that the bishop knows me, the pastor knows me. They were there with us for a few days. We went to the church, and they began to know, oh, I was a member of the Paul Yonggi Cho's, crusade committee. You know what I mean? They began to see us not like teenagers, which they were. They were thinking that just because we have no salaries, they thought we were very irresponsible and dependent. But actually we were not. We had a life of our own, and we had principles of our own. We had a home of our own. At that time, Anika was still in the womb. And they were very impressed with the way we were living our lives. And everything changed as far as my wife's family is concerned. From that trip onwards, they began to see us as leaders. They began to see us as responsible individuals. Do you see what I'm saying? And the same brother who was resisting DTS, from Wiki coming to DTS, he sent 3 of his 5 children landed up doing a DTS. Do you see what I'm saying? Of course, he passed away now, but when he was alive, he told all of his children, always listen to Uncle Aldrin and Auntie Vicky. That's the kind of, when you show your maturity, they will see it. But if you are half the time immature, they will have all the more reasons to call you back home. Oh, mommy, if you're always immature in the way you function, that means you're not ready to live out in the real world, right? And sometimes we have a lot of immature stuff. A lot of people, if I were their parents, I would call them back home as well. So it's really not about our parents, it's about perhaps the person. You have to become a mature person. And by that I mean a person with dignity, a person who takes your work seriously, where you get up on time, you sleep on time, you build relationships, you know how to talk, you know how to save, you do your work well. Then people will observe that and say, well, he knows what he's doing. Let him go, he's already standing on his own feet. And they will bless you.
Now, you no doubt you've seen a number of ministries and ministry centers start up. Some have succeeded and grown, others have failed and closed down. What factors have you seen to be make the difference between success and failure
In that sense,
yeah.
I think clear vision versus unclear vision is crucial to distinguish between what lasts long and what lasts for a smaller time. Clarity of the vision. Secondly, interpersonal skills. When you work in ministry in a pioneering situation, your ministry is directly proportionate to your ability to relate with people that are working with you. My role right now is not a very hands-on role, but when I did have a hands-on role, when for example, when I was completely involved with 1628, very much hands-on, that was the only thing I did at that time. I had a very large ministry team, and I would credit that to the principle of interpersonal skills. I had a team of 30 people in no time. That's because every day I spent time with them. Every day we worship. We did a lot of things together, right? So a lot of people don't understand either like if you understand your vision clearly, the chances of lasting long is higher. Clarity of your vision. If you understand how to work with people, how to champion people's, how to pull out people's giftings, that plays a huge role in success versus failure. Thirdly, your finances, your ability to trust God for finances. Finances are very practical. I have seen a lot of people fail or wind up what they're doing simply because they don't have the finances for it. And I don't always blame them. I don't think there's only one angle to financial failures. There could be many angles to it. But finances is another factor to something that will last long versus. So we need to have a financial model to whatever we do. We have to ask ourselves, what is the model I'm trying to build my ministry on? You understand, a financial model. Fourth thing is your ability to relate, and I think it's kind of in some ways connected to finances. Your ability to connect with people outside of your ministry, with other Christian leaders, with other YWAM bases, with bigger leaders, with smaller leaders, with pastors, with bishops, with other organizations. Your ability to develop formal relationships, strategic relationships with those who are outside of your ministry team. Your concepts of partnerships, because you don't need to do everything alone. You can partner with another agency, right? So if you don't know how to do that, very soon you will be spending too much energy and you will become tired doing all by yourselves, right? And I think morality, spirituality, purity, all this is another factor. Faithfulness to God. If you're living in sin, it'll never work. We will sin. Sin will be a part of our lives. But what I'm saying is, if you're not repenting, and if you're unrepentant, unteachable, and proud and arrogant all the time, it'll never last too long, right? So these are the 4 or 5 things I can think of. Vision, clarity versus disclarity. The ability to relate with people well versus inability to relate with people well. Then, the finances, the ability to cultivate financial partners, and the ability to create and cultivate healthy relationship with other ministries and churches and partners, versus not having the ability to do that. And because I use the word ability, it's something that you and I need to learn to do that. You understand? It's not just a talent. Sometimes we think it's a talent. Yeah, it may be a talent for some people, but you need to learn certain things. Certainly, certain things need to be acquired over a period of time. So these are crucial elements that can either make your ministry last for a long time, or make it fade away after some time. Now, having said that, my last comment would be that sometimes maybe the Lord gives you a vision that's only for a season. Seasons of life also changes. You understand? And so there is always that God factor. What is God really telling you? You understand? Maybe that ministry was for a particular season in your life, and you did it. So you also need to be careful to understand what season, what stage of life you're involved in right now. But the principle is, pray to God, seek His wisdom, talk to the organizers, involve your family in the decision-making process, and do what you feel God is telling you in the process of doing those 3 things. Yeah.
And of course, we're often advised to find a mentor, and we're often told that it's good to be discipling other people. How do we find a mentor, someone to mentor us, and how do we know who find people to disciple?
Yeah. A lot of times when we think about mentors, we think about somebody very professional, somebody very perfect, somebody very experienced, somebody very famous. We think about mentors being, they need to be 20 steps ahead of us, right? But I think that's a wrong notion that many people have. I took a course, a seminar actually on leadership for a week, and it was a seminar on mentoring, and we were supposed to write down what took place in our lives. I was about 35 years old when I did this exercise, and I was looking at all the people that influenced my life, and I was pleasantly surprised. I always thought nobody mentored me until I took that seminar. I realized people actually mentored me. They just didn't tell me they were mentoring me. You understand? So we think mentoring is a very formal role. Now, it's okay to have a formal mentoring role. But generally speaking, in Christian mentoring, most mentoring happens even though you do not know it's happening. Right? But because we have knowledge base always increasing, today we can learn about mentoring, we can read about mentoring, we can Google about mentoring. We can make it a formal part of our lives. So here is what I would advise. You have to know the difference between mentoring, coaching, and being discipled. You understand? We all need to be discipled. You agree with that, right? We all need to be discipled. I need to be discipled in my life. I also need to be mentored. I need to be coached. Let me show you the difference between these three things that will help you to understand how to find the appropriate person to guide your life. Discipling process is usually to do with my spiritual habits. It's to do with my spiritual disciplines. It's to do with my ministry disciplines, right? It's to do with me, for example, how can I learn forgiving tough people? That's a spiritual exercise. A normal mentor, a leadership guru may not understand, but a discipler, because there are spiritual forces involved. There are roots of bitterness. When you give room, the Bible says, the evil spirits, when you give room, when you give a foothold to the evil one, the devil, the demonic forces will take over and attack you. You need a discipler, you need a spiritual person to help you deal with forgiveness issues in life. You understand? So you need a pastor, you need a teacher, you need a follower of Christ to disciple you in that. You need somebody who's himself forgiven, herself forgiven, right? So those are usually spiritual exercises, spiritual disciplines. Coaching is a very specific area of your life. If you understand the Indian cricket will have several coaches. You'll have the senior coach, who is the coach over all the coaches. Then you'll have a fielding coach. You'll have the spinners coach. You'll have the fast bowling coach. You'll have a coach who will help you to coach you to understand how to handle popularity, fame, because you'll become famous, right? And if you get carried away, you will lose your sports. You'll have a coach who will help you understand your finances. I remember one cricket player, he got 6 crores. He comes from a slum, joined the Indian national cricket team. And the first season he was joined IPL, and he was given 6 crores. And after the first year, he didn't want to play cricket anymore because he got 6 crores. He got 6 crores. Now he doesn't need the money. He's never seen 6 crores in his life. So he needed a coach to help him understand life. He needed some psychologists, some counselors. And now he's still playing cricket now. But he went through a season where he saw so much money that he thought, why should I get up early in the morning and run when I can be, satisfied with 6 crores? People who win a lottery, they don't know what to do with life. All of a sudden they win a lottery and they go berserk in their lives. So coaching is very specific. For example, I want to know how to preach a good sermon in 15 minutes. I don't have that art, but I see that somebody has that art. I can go to him and say, can you coach me how to deliver a talk in 15 minutes? So he's coaching you in a very specific, it's not 2 years commitment, it's a very specific goal that you and he has. Mentoring usually is a much larger situation of life, right? And you can be mentored by your own colleagues with your own age groups, right? So, David can mentor me. I can mentor him. There are certain things that David is extremely good at, and I can be mentored by him in those areas. And there are certain things that I'm extremely good at, and he's like, how do you do this? And it's not like, come on, mentor me now. No. We sit down over chai and we talk, how do you do this? And we learn from one another. That's called peer mentoring, right? There are certain times you need to acknowledge that there's somebody there, wow, I'd like to be mentored by him. In my life, I wrote to Steve Cochran. I sent him an email, in 2000, this is 13 years ago. He's such a busy guy, my goodness, so difficult to get him. But then I said, there's no harm in trying to ask him. So I sent him an email, and I said, I know you're very busy. I don't know how I exactly worded my email, but I did tell him, I know you're very busy, but would you pray about mentoring me? So about 3 or 4 days later, I received an email. I would be thrilled to mentor you, Aldrin. How do you propose we start? He put the ball back on my court. So I told him, Steve, you know what? Can we have lunch or coffee or tea or dinner or breakfast once in a month? I need 2 hours from you once in a month. Right? He said, great. He didn't give me the idea. I gave him the idea. Right? Because if you want to be mentored, you need to have a thirst to learn. Steve doesn't need to run behind me. I need to run behind him. Right? So, we had number of lunches and chais and coffees and breakfasts and dinners in my house, in his house. And the way he would mentor me, I would go to him with 1 or 2 questions. I remember asking him a question, how do you read so many books? You're always reading so many books. How do you do that? So he just shared, and I'm just learning from him. Do you see that? Do you see what I'm saying? So it was an arrangement we made. It became very formal. Once in a month, 2 hours, and I will be the one asking him the question. And he will be the one who will respond to those questions. Right? And in the process, we've had many, many, many opportunities of fellowships. Sometimes we only lasted 30 minutes. Sometimes it lasted 3-4 hours we sat down. Depends on his time and depends on my time. And so you can have peer mentors, you can have upward mentors, people you look up to, right? And another way you can be mentored is by mentoring someone else. If you know something more than somebody else, you teach them. And when you teach them, you will realize, wow, I'm becoming better in my teaching abilities. And you're actually being mentored in your teaching skills, your impartation skills. So mentoring is a very relational thing. It's a very informal. Most mentoring takes place in very informal avenues of life, right? And if you want to be mentored, you need to ask. You need to take the ownership. If you're expecting your leader will come alongside and will mentor you, it's never going to happen. I've had many leaders in my life. I can tell you all the names of all my leaders. They never once came to me and told me, now I'd like to mentor you. Because it's very embarrassing to go and tell someone, I'd like to mentor you, right? It's very arrogant to tell people, right? But if people come to me, like I can tell you names. I don't mind telling you names. Paul Thomas came to me and said, would you mentor me? I was honored. I said, I would love to do that, man. So we defined our own mechanism. We defined our own formula. And we met so many times. He stayed in this house. He stayed in my old house. He stayed in my old house. You know what I mean? I remember 3 different houses he spent the night with us. Did you see what I'm saying? So the onus is not on me as a mentor. The onus is on the mentee who's coming. Because then the learning becomes powerful. Yeah? I went to one person here in the city and I said, I would like to be mentored by you. And he said, sure. He's the national director of some big organization. And what I like about him is the ability, he's so calm, he's so quiet, he's so full of God in his life. You know what I mean? He's in his mid-60s. And when he speaks with such great wisdom. And I told him, every time I sit with you in your air-conditioned office, I feel like I'm just drawing so much from you. He says, come. Anytime you want to come, come. Spend time with me. So he doesn't call me all the time. I call him and I said, Uncle, are you free right now? Can I just come 30 minutes? And if he's busy, he will tell me. If he's not busy, I just go and just sit with him. Just talk to him. And every time I come away, I feel like I got impartation. I feel like, he's so full of God in his life. You understand? So, in summary, take the initiative and ask a person, can you mentor me? Don't assume and say, they should have to come to me. They will not, because they have so much work already. Right? And so you have to be serious. Yep.
Well, we'd like to thank you, Aldrin, for answering these questions. And you've done very well. And this has been very informative for us. We also would like to thank our studio audience, the SOMD. And thank you, we'd like to thank the YouTube viewer for joining us as well. And we hope you'll come back next time.